Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning, everybody. We will seek to explain a sector which has particularly impressive decarbonisation ambitions, and we're going to explain fundamentally how rail freight can play a leading part in what we are calling real modal shift and taking a policy lead. This is effectively road to rail. Fundamentally, the question is, how do you do it? Where's the policy lead and where is the private sector lead? Today I'm going to be introducing John Trenchard, the VP Commercial and Supply Chain of the UK for DP World, Tim Shoveler, the CEO UK Europe G&W for Freightliner, and Geoff Tomlinson, the CEO of FSEW Freight, who are freight forwarders. Each of these gentlemen will be explaining their part in this patchwork with regards to how this is delivered, both rail and road. I just wanted to explain a little bit more about why this is necessary and where the policy framework brings it about. Transport, as some of you may know, remains a very stubborn part of the UK CO2 emissions mix. It's remained stubborn at about 26% of the total emitted volume in the United Kingdom. Housing has reduced significantly. Energy, as you will know, has reduced significantly as we switch from coal to gas to renewables and nuclear. But transport remains stubborn. So how do you get there? And what are the various initiatives which are necessary? We would conclude, and I think you're going to hear about how this is being delivered, that the private sector can take a lead. Government can set targets. Government has said it wishes to see a 75% increase in rail freight by 2050. But how do you actually get there? The end-to-end decarbonisation is absolutely critical. The ability to replace HGV movements with freight rail movements is, of course, key. There are questions around capacity. There are questions around the final mile. But fundamentally, as you're about to hear, DP World, working with its partners, is delivering on this with an innovative, bespoke solution, which we all hope the rest of the sector will follow, and ministers, whatever colour they may be, red, blue or yellow even, can also support, and we're seeing positive signs there. So first of all, I'd like to introduce John Trenchard, the Vice President Commercial and Supply Chain of DP World in the UK.
14 of you who've come here to learn a little bit about how we can actually move road to rail and make a tangible difference today in actually accessing supply chain CO2 savings. So DP World in the UK operates 2 deep water container terminals and carries about half of all of the containerized freight in and out of the United Kingdom, servicing supply chains in the UK economy. So that's why we've got some kind of scale or skin in the game. We've traditionally been a port operator, and we've started getting more involved in end-to-end supply chain. And our customers in that end-to-end supply chain are asking more and more about the carbon or decarbonisation credentials of their supply chain. And that's really what we're looking at here. It's not just a compliance issue, this is also a commercial opportunity to try and have some relevance in the supply chain dealing with our customers. And rail is a really, really important part of that journey. So if you take rail is about 80% more efficient in terms of CO2 than road. And if you take a container delivery from Southampton to Birmingham, that costs, in terms of CO2, about 550 kilos of CO2 per truckload that goes up country. If you do it by rail and road combination, that's about 300 kilos. So the executive summary is, for every box that we can move from road to railroad, it saves the UK carbon economy around 1/4 of a tonne of CO2. And by the way, we move around 10 million containers in the UK market, so there's a big addressable market here. There's also a commercial angle to this, because it's in my interest to make sure rail is as interesting as possible from the ports that we operate, because that means we have a bigger addressable market and we can service more customers in the United Kingdom. So it's important on that basis. So there's been a lot of looking into this area. How can we make it more attractive? Rail, back in 2013, was about 35% of all the containers going through the port in Southampton went by rail. By the start of 2023, that had gone down to just 21%. So we decided to do something about it, and not waiting on supply side, but to do a demand side thing. And we set up a Modal Shift Programme, which offers innovative financial incentives for customers to choose rail over road. And how it works, we set up a 12-month trial starting in September, and basically we charge £10 per container for a box coming across the quay, and that goes into an incentive pool. If your box goes on rail within 140 miles of the port, you receive £80 incentive payment. If your box goes on rail beyond 140 miles from the port, you get your charge back, so there's net zero impact financially. If your box goes by road, there's no payment at all. So we've now got 6 months worth of data on what this means, and we can tell you that from a baseline of 21%, from September to December, we actually achieved 26% by rail. In January, we made it to 31%, and in February, we hit 35% of all containers coming through the port in Southampton going by rail. What does that mean? It means 13,500 truck journeys eliminated and replaced by rail with road as the final mile. It means 2 million HGV road miles removed from the UK economy, not with any technological change, but just by using the trains that we've already got set up. The calculation is about 4,500 tonnes of CO2 saved, which doesn't sound that much, but it's a ramp up of the trial. But to put that into context, that's more than twice the total amount of CO2 we're actually producing operationally in the port at Southampton. So we'd like to try and scale this further. So we're here today to just explain this is what we're doing. It's active trial. It will run until the end of August. We are now looking over the next few weeks to announce what we're going to do for 2025. Do we extend this further? Do we extend it into London Gateway? Or do we potentially also change this in terms of some of the feedback that we're doing? But this is tangible progress which is happening today, and customers are making the choice about a road delivery or a rail and road delivery. In the past, we've talked about competitive advantage in the supply chain. It's really important we start thinking about collaborative advantage in the supply chain, and that's why I'd like to pass over and hear some of the things about how customers are using this, and we've got others here who are using this Modal Shift Programme today. It's a first for the UK. We didn't know if it was going to work. Seems to be accepted, seems to be driving change. We've still got more data to crunch through, Tony.
Thank you, John. Could I now bring in Tim Shoveler, who's the CEO of one of Britain's leading rail freight companies, Freightliner, and just ask him what modal shift means for him, what the policy ambition means, and what the future combined with government targets, but practically on the ground or on the track, if I can say, this initiative also means.
Absolutely. Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Super. So I'll just speak for a few minutes then, just to introduce our company and explain how the work we've been doing with John's team here has been so amazing and transformational in terms of the way that we operate from Southampton. So Freightliner, we operate in 4 countries, in here in the UK, but also in Poland, Germany and the Netherlands. And in all those countries we operate intermodal trains, the type we're talking about here, and trains with heavy haul, as in stones, aggregates and things like that. Now this has been a really significant development because, as John said, the rail share of container market from Southampton have been falling quite significantly. It's obviously a huge problem for us, but it's also a huge problem for the environment, and we're missing a big opportunity. So if I could, I just want to spend a minute explaining why rail. Why is rail the thing that we should be focusing on? Simply, it goes to, rail is the mode of transport has the least use of carbon and the least use of energy of any land-based transport. It's incredibly efficient. You can take a 40-ton rail vehicle, put it on a straight bit of track, and you can push it. It's the only environment I know where I can move a 40-ton load just on my own. It's actually much harder to stop it if you want to on your own once it started rolling. This is why trains struggle with the leaves in the autumn. So there's some really inherent advantages to railways because the amount of energy that we use is so low. That means that in terms of the climate change challenge that we have just now, moving goods onto the railway is a no-brainer. Currently in the UK, about 9% of all freight travels by rail. That's 19% in Germany. So we could easily double what we're doing, and that's before we get into some of the really innovative stuff. So I'm really keen to see that we find ways of encouraging our customers and our partners to use rail. The challenge we've got is that for the last 14 years or so, long-haul trunk road freight has got cheaper. So the cost of road operation year on year has been reduced because there's been no change, for example, in the fuel tax duty escalator now for 14 years. But every year our track access charges that we pay to run trains on the network goes up by RPI, not just inflation, RPI. So track access charges now are 140% higher than they were 14 years ago. Full duty is the same. And that's a really simple example of the things that government's done, not deliberately to make rail less attractive, but inadvertently make rail less attractive because the economics have been supporting long-haul trunk rail. Rail could always win on a service from, from Southampton to Manchester. Now some trucks will do it for the same price. This makes no sense at all in a world when we're trying to make the best use of the rail capacity that we've got. If we're going to do that, we've got the longest trains, up to 775 metres long, and I need to fill them. And thanks to this really innovative trial that John has launched, we've been able to do that much more. So we've seen that our services from Southampton, whether it be to Cardiff, as we're going to hear more about, or Manchester, Liverpool, Scotland, and Doncaster, Leeds, are actually growing in capacity because of the fact that the Modal Shift grant has been introduced. It provides a really strong, clear incentive to our customers to use rail over the trunk haul part of road. And of course, look, I'm not against road. We've got some lorries ourselves because we need to distribute the containers when they get to the ultimate terminal. But the trunk haul bit should absolutely be on rail. Now, the government has recently announced a 75% growth target for rail, which is the first time there's ever been a rail freight growth target, but that takes till 2050 to get to 75%. So that's just 2% of growth a year. So whilst I'm pleased the government has set that target, I'm calling on government, this current one and any future governments, to be much more ambitious. We really should be talking about doubling or trebling rail freight, as we managed to see is perfectly possible in Germany, Poland and the Netherlands. So we can do the same. The involvement of private sector support that John's outlined here, I think is something really innovative and something that we don't see anywhere else. Finally, let me just say, so it is working for us. The thing that I'm really pleased to hear John refer to later is what happens next. If there's one challenge I think we have just now is that some of our customers, we have relationships that have lasted for many, many years and they have very established supply chains. So the incentive, great as it is, if it's just temporary, doesn't necessarily create that incentive to switch and invest in a different type of supply chain that has lower carbon emissions that we've just been describing. So in whatever way, John, that you take this forward, I'm really excited that will actually, I think, underpin a permanent move to freight, and I think that will generate further increases in volume. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'd like to introduce Geoff Tomlinson, the CEO of FSEW Freight, a key customer agent and freight forwarder. And Geoff, if you can also explain, apart from telling us about your business, the key partnership going forward with rail as you see it.
Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. So my name's Geoff Tomlinson. I'm the Managing Director and Founder of FSEW. We're a freight forwarder, a worldwide freight forwarder based in Cardiff. We've been operating now for 22 years. So we are the market leader, I believe, in decarbonisation of heavy freight. We're really putting our money where our mouths are, and to back us up, we were the first to commercially operate fully electric HGVs in the UK from a rail terminal. On the back of this, we are fully driven to decarbonise our whole fleet of trucks, and we'll be operating no diesel trucks as of the December 2024. So we're really thinking, what are we doing, how are we doing it, and how do we go forward? And the first part of our thought process is, how are we affecting our communities? Now, back in 2017, there was a news article as to Cardiff being the 4th most polluted city in the UK. And our trucks were contributing to that. So that's why we started our journey. And what interested us about the MSP so much was, one of the other cities that our trucks pollutes a lot of is Southampton. So we should really look to help that community and do more in taking carbon out of freight, certainly for Southampton. So we were already using Tim's company, as it happens, Freightliner, for rail services from Southampton into Cardiff on a daily basis. But since the beginning of this process, we've now upped our rail use by 40%. So it's really helping us make a difference. It helps us with clients that want to use larger volume, move larger volume between the port and the final destination. And a showcase of that, a case study for that, would be a client of ours recently asked us to deliver 95 containers in 2.5 days from Southampton to their door. And with the help of Tim's colleagues at the Freightliner head office, we were able to put a lot more on the railway, and we delivered all but 6 of them by rail. So for us, it's something that has certainly got a bigger future going forward, and it's certainly something that our customers are saying they'd like us to use.
Thanks, Geoff. I just wondered if I could pose a few questions to the panel, which I dare say observers of this initiative may themselves have. And it's interesting when the private sector takes an initiative like this, and the costs involved, and the extent to which it might even be seen as sticking its neck out. John, has it to date, and we've heard what you've already said, but has it been worth it? Are you intending to continue and to grow the initiative? And perhaps more importantly, how can you roll it out wider and further?
Okay. So the underlying thing here is that this is generating a financing opportunity to pay for the incentive. So every single import container that comes in Southampton contributes to that. So that's quite a difficult discussion to have to customers. We are now going to charge you £10 more, but it's okay because we're saving the planet. I think that there is an understanding that this is doing the right thing, and there are enough people across the supply chain who are prepared to take a step in the right direction and show some leadership. So I think that this has probably been accepted. In terms of, and just to give the scale of this, we have paid out over £2 million in incentives during the first 6 months of this. So this is real money. This is putting your money where your mouth is and doing something. And we are now having discussions with customers who otherwise wouldn't talk to us about how can we do more with rail? How can we access the rail? How can we book these? We've even got examples of well-known retailers diverting cargo from other ports in the UK to come to Southampton because of the Modal Shift Programme and being able to access the grant. We also have examples of Chinese forwarders quite interested in getting £80 or $110 back because they can get a box through to the Midlands. So yes, I think it's been, on a commercial state, useful. On a decarbonisation journey, useful, and some learnings. And now we are looking to see, can we roll this out further? One bit of feedback that we've had is that we've had to right-size the incentive every quarter. So it started at £70, then it went to £100, and now it's £80. And some customers are saying they want a bit more stability for that. So we're trying to now think about, can we make that a 6-monthly review moving forward into 2025. We are looking to extend it in Southampton, and we've got the potential to do that in London Gateway as well. But I just have to say, this is not an expensive widget that converts molecules to other molecules and does something with electrolysis that I don't understand and saves the planet. This is using the resources we have as a nation today in a correct manner and being efficient with what we've got. Yes, we need to do the other stuff, that's great, but we don't need to wait until this stuff is ready. We can get going with stuff now.
And in the theme of that, Tim, could I ask what else you would look from possibly to government for. We hear about massive change in the way the railways are governed and led, with the emergence of a cross-party agreement almost on the emergence of Great British Railways, where you will remain a private sector within the future of the railway network. What exactly would you like to see from government with regards to electrification, what we call the final mile policy lead, to help you maximise initiatives like this?
Yeah, thank you. So look, we're really pleased to see that the current government and indeed now the Labour Party are both backing the change to Great British Railways, which will consolidate the leadership and the thinking of the railway industry for the first time in about 25 years, and that's really important. To John's point, that's how we can maximise the value of the current railway network, and it will result in greater efficiencies. So that principle, I think, is very well established. What I'd like to see from government, and indeed Great British Railways, once it's established, is really clear policy signals that support the use of rail freight. That's a challenge because obviously freight generally doesn't vote, whereas passengers do. And passengers are very vocal about everything from closing ticket offices to their trains being late. So we, as the community that support and operate freight, have to be really vocal with government to land our arguments. And that's exactly what we're doing. But for example, I gave some good practice from Germany. What they've done in Germany is agree that the price of electricity to power electric trains will never be more than the price of diesel. They float together. And that means that in Germany I can make a decision to invest in expensive electric locomotives. They cost more to buy, about £6 million for an electric locomotive. But you can secure that investment on the knowledge that electricity will continue to be no more expensive than diesel. One of the challenges we've seen here in the UK in the last couple of years is electricity has been so much more expensive than diesel that some companies have found it impossible to continue running electric trains, which again is a bit crazy because we know that any freight moved by rail is 76% better than road, if that's just a diesel train. If it's an electric train, it's over 90% less carbon than if it's moved by road. So I think it's really compelling for government to provide those policy signals and to make sure that there is a framework that allows me to invest our private sector equity into growing the amount of traffic we move by electric freight.
Geoff, could I ask what the reaction has been from parts of the road haulage sector you may be obviously familiar with, and the extent to which there are some people who need to accept or might need to accept that this is going to be the flow of progress, and where road does need to work better with rail, and what's needed there?
I mean, I've been quite surprised at the slow intake for haulage companies to look at changing their ways from diesel to alternative fuels. I think sometimes as a haulage operator myself, we don't help ourselves, but the whole model of the companies will have to change, because you won't just be operating a few trucks now. You're going to operate an investment kind of business that has to really invest in very expensive equipment. You know, a diesel truck at £100,000, an electric truck at £300,000. Then you have to have an electric charging unit. You know, then you have to have a relationship with the grid operator, which you probably won't recognise or have done before in your life. You'll have a different relationship with your dealership, because you're now operating something that's totally different to a diesel truck. You know, your drivers, it all has to change. And so to answer the question, I'm finding that the haulage sector itself has been quite slow in approach of making these final mile deliveries zero tailpipe for sure.
John, you're clearly taking a policy lead here, and you're the first of a kind, to use a term. But what are you looking to do differently? Where do you think there's room for improvement? Where can the initiative be tightened and improved?
Okay, so I think this is about integrity and trying to do the right thing. We need to ensure that we're showing the results of what's going on. So we need to have independent verification and showing that results which are going through, so we can see what that impact change is going on. We need to have stability so that customers who are doing long-term contracts, maybe for 1 or 2 years for the supply chains, can actually, as Tim said, bet on this, so that they know that this is in place and they can make decisions about their supply chains moving forward to go through that. And then we also need a little bit of leadership across all of the supply chain and consumers in the supply chain to be brave enough to try something new. Just because you've been trucking your solution up to Coventry or to Loughborough for the last 15 years, it might not be that is the solution moving forward. I hear a lot of objections about, well, it's giving flexibility and whatever. This is a supply chain that started potentially in China, maybe in Africa or in Latin America 13 weeks ago. And the rail is great, and it's a combination of things, and it's something that might be programmed over 2 or 3 days, but not necessarily 1 day. So I think it's something about leadership, it's about stability, and it's about how do we expand this over time, and challenging people to step in and try something new.
We have a couple of minutes left. Would anybody like to ask a question?
Very intimate, this location.
And if they don't, I will. Gentleman here, you speak up a little. We do have a roving mic.
There's a lady over here as well.
Excellent, right.
Okay, you able to hear me now? Yes, just a question for John there. Do you envisage any sort of challenges in the next few years in terms of the capacity of the rail system to deal with the freight? And I'm only saying this as kind of one of your industry colleagues, which hopefully will be kind of joining on the journey sooner rather than later. That's a lot of TEU on the rail. I know that you mentioned about the government stepping in, but DP World, I'm sure, will be looking at their metrics based on capacity, etc. So I'd just be interested. So
we've only got a couple of minutes, and I won't go into huge detail. In Southampton, I don't think we'll hit it anytime soon. In London Gateway, round North London, there is some capacity squeezes, and Tim knows much more about this. So it's something which I think it would be great to start touching the edges of, rather than worrying too much about it at this tactical level. I don't know whether you want to add anything, Tim.
I agree. So certainly for Southampton, there's no problem in the foreseeable future. Of course, you can run more trains. You can also run longer trains. And there's been some quite substantial progress in allowing us to run trains that are now 775 metres long, which is nowhere as long as my sort of American friends that run trains that sort of 2 miles long. But for the UK, that's a pretty long train. So we do have the opportunity to increase capacity. And we're working hard to make sure that we can get the most out of our vehicles by perhaps doing 2 round trips a day rather than just 1. That brings down the price, which is clearly hugely important, but it also makes better use of the rail capacity. There are some places in the country where there is more of a challenge. So, for example, with the government's decision to terminate HS2 in the middle of a field in Staffordshire, that causes a long-term problem for the West Coast Main Line. Let's hope that we can come back to that problem and resolve that medium-term capacity problem, after the election.
I think we had somebody over here who wanted to ask a question. Lady over there.
Thank you very much. That was super interesting. I'm afraid I don't have a short question, but I was actually really interested, John, to find out more about the financing and whether you helped set that up, whether who you were speaking to in government, and whether who you were speaking to in government for the financing scheme. And if you're expanding that further and speaking to the likes of National Highways, Network Rail, and just thinking about that end-to-end supply chain.
So I think we're running out of time, and I only heard part of the question because we're competing with a rather big stage over here. I can take that with you offline, but to be clear, the Modal Shift Programme from DP World is self-financing by DP World. So the customers of DP World are contributing to this, and then the payment is going out to the same or other customers of DP World. So it's not taking any draw at all on public funds. This is an entirely private initiative with our supply chain partners who are also private across the supply chain.
John, Tim and Geoff, thank you very much for giving us those insights, and thank you all very much for attending.